think a lot of people would go straight towards the, well, God healed me, he did this, God, did this in my life. And while those are all great things, I think when you're actually coming from a place as a believer and you're speaking to another believer, those are the times to go and say, God healed me, God showed me this, because that's someone else that understands what you're saying. If you're trying to convince somebody and have them understand, why do I believe in God, or why have I stayed with God, they're not going to really be able to understand, because God has not revealed himself to them.
So as stupid as it seems, or as stupid as it sounds, I started to question my faith when I met a boy. Meet this guy who's very handsome, charming, smart, and immediately I'm like, yes. Even though I asked one of my friends, is he a Christian? And she said, I don't think so. I'm like, nah, still gonna go for it. Anyway, we start dating. And I began to realize, okay, he's an atheist. And before this, I've never really questioned my faith at all. Sorry. I've never questioned my faith. Hardcore Christian. Because God is my everything, right? Well, my entire time growing up, my pastor and every other person in my church always said, an atheist doesn't know how to love, they can't love you, right? And then I meet this guy that I'm falling head over heels for. And he's an atheist, and I'm thinking, well, he is a good person. What do you mean atheists can't love? And that's when all the questioning began. I started to question the authority of my church, of the people at my church, my pastor, my youth group leaders. I started to wonder if they actually knew what they were talking about. And they do. I'm not saying that they're ignorant by any means, but maybe in some ways, all right, sorry, they're ignorant in some ways. I think it's stupid for people to believe that atheists can't love. That's stupid, because there's thousands of religions out there, and to assume that only Christians know how to love well is dumb. So anyway, I'm seeing this boy for a little bit, and I can feel it in my soul that I'm not supposed to be doing this. This is going against the whole plan of marrying a Christian man and finding that guy whose heart is set on fire for Jesus. And so I remember actually having these screaming matches with God in my living room, pacing back and forth, being like, why can't I be with him? I want to. And God, back when I could actually feel God's presence, or if God's real, that's what I felt. God would always say, no, Audrey, wait, just wait. I have something planned for you. And I was like, no, I want to make my own decisions, for once. And the more that I started to ignore that little voice, and the more that I started to disobey that voice in my head, God, whatever, the more I started to feel this sense of freedom and control of, okay, I don't have to do whatever I feel God's telling me to do. I can do what I think feels right. And so I felt like this rebellious child. I think I actually, I was writing once, and I said it felt like God and I were in this boxing arena, boxing it out, and he kind of got tired and walked away, and then I was standing victorious. and then being at USF, reading all these famous, well-known, crazy, wicked smart, intelligent authors who are atheists, reading their works, I started to especially question the authority of my church, because I'm like, well, my pastor, can't say his name, my pastor doesn't have a doctorate in structural theory. What does he know? Kind of thing. I sound like a terrible person. But many reasons. Oh my gosh. Like just the hypocrisy of people at church, or like how so many of them, their biggest goal was just to find their Christian husband and then, have a bunch of money and like raise their Christian little babies in their cute little home in the comfort of their Midwest bubble. And it was infuriating to me because there's so much brokenness that's in this world, and they were like, well, no, it's just God's plan. Karen, okay, Karen, is it really God's plan for this 5-year-old to be getting raped every day of her life and then she dies? For sure. And people are like, well, I don't know what to say about that. I'm sorry, I totally just sound like I'm ranting. I am ranting. I was angry, and that's why I lost faith in Christianity. It was just all about anger and confusion. And it seemed easier to turn away from it than to keep struggling through the questioning and believing at the same time. Just, it didn't seem to add up anymore.
I grew up in a Lutheran family, and we were super involved in church. So every week we were in church at 8 a.m., 7:30 a.m. for an 8 o'clock church. And my mom played the organ. My dad's been an elder, church president. We did Sunday school, we did youth group, Thursday or Wednesday night meals, like everything. We were super involved. And then I also went to my church's Lutheran school through elementary school and a Lutheran high school. So I was super surrounded by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, specifically faith, through my entire childhood, which is a faith that's really, or a branch of Christianity that's really interested in being educated about your faith. So I learned a lot of theology, specifically the Lutheran theology. And we talked about other theologies as well, but as far as just this really specific knowledge of God and who he is and who we need him to be and who we are in relation to him, and all of these really nitpicky, very theological details. And then in places outside of that very Lutheran kind of concentrated area is where I had more opportunity for learning relationship with God. So I don't think that I've ever had really a time of a lack of faith, but I've always been really blessed with people who give me information and allow me to ask questions. I have been fortunate to have a really strong relationship with God throughout my life, and he feels very present in, not necessarily always in the sense of I feel that God is doing what I want or showing up in the ways that I want him to, because he's God and I'm not. But in the ways, I guess, that life doesn't always make sense to me, and God doesn't always make sense to me, but my faith and my understanding of who God is helps me to make sense of things. So I've dealt with loss, and what's gotten me through that is being able to have a place to cling to. And when I have questions about life, I just think I would be really sad if I didn't have my faith, if I wasn't in a relationship with the Lord. And I also understand myself to be completely his creation, and my identity comes from being loved by God. And so if I was not Christian, that would be completely forsaking my understanding of why I exist and those kind of fundamental questions. That's where I've found those answers.
I need you to understand.
My mother, there's a definite switch where she is my mother and I love her, and she's mom, and she does all the things that you love your mom for, taking care of you, having conversations, having discussions through experience and learning. When the switch flips, it's all it's all Bible rant, or it's, this is the way it is because God made it that way, and it wouldn't be any different unless God wanted it that way. Or all the negative things that happen are because of God's permissive will, and all the good things that happen are God's will in some sense, and we have no control over anything, and we're all going to hell in a handbasket. And I love her dearly, and I understand where those beliefs can set in and sink and be a permanence. But for me, I've always been wary, and also just growing up in it. Anybody who grows up in a religion, there wasn't necessarily a choice. It was just that's what it was. That's the culture that you grow up in. I felt like it was somebody else's. I felt like it was my mother's or my grandmother's or my family's. I realized it wasn't mine. Or at least I realized it was less of mine than what I had thought before. And then it got to a point, especially around high school, where I would go just to save face for the most part. I still do. I'm nearly 30, and every time I go back for Christmas or holidays, I go to church with Mom, because that's tradition, and that's my cross to bear, to go to church. And my mom will still tell me to this day, it's like, pray for faith. And I'm like, Mom, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, to pray for faith. Why would I believe in something or be held to religion where I have to pray to believe in it, right? Maybe when you were younger, when I was younger, it was that security, right? Okay, I believe this, and it's easy, and I'm comfortable with it. I can do it. I can put it off. But then when I became an adult, and I'm like, I want to be genuine, and I want to be individual, and I want to be authentic. And I realized I had to shuck off some things. Religion was, the faith was the first things to go.
When I was growing up, I grew up in a very mixed religious family, you might say. My father was an agnostic. My mother was a devout Catholic. I was raised as, essentially Catholic. However, my sister left the Catholic Church when she was 16 or something like that. My father never went to church. My mother was sick a lot. So as a teenager, I wound up going to church by myself. What was my relationship like? I don't know if it was very deep back then, probably rather shallow. I believed in God, and I was trying to do the right thing. But at that, as a child, as a teenager, my relationship with God was rather shallow. That's how I would describe it. As an older individual, as a young adult, I learned more about my faith. I made a deeper commitment to my faith, and I actually read and studied the Bible for the first time. And I feel that Christ is the way, and there's nowhere else for me to go. So that's why I've stayed a Christian. Even though I've moved back and forth between the Catholic Church, and I was an evangelical for a while, then I returned to the Catholic Church. But other than that, I have seen no reason to not be a Christian based on my own faith, my own prayer life, my own study, and so I guess that's it.
If there was ever anything remotely sexual on TV, my parents were like that's bad, don't do that. Like, that's not what God would want. And it was like that with a lot of things. But I guess I never super felt like I had a personal relationship with God, I guess, like a lot of people feel. It was more like routine of doing stuff, like going places, well, not places, church. Like going to church on Sunday, or like being surrounded by people who were really religious and had those beliefs definitely stronger than I had. And so, I don't know, it was weird because I was a part of it, but not, I guess. Because I just kind of stopped going to church after I left college, because I think a lot of the reason I went was for guilt that other people were doing it. And then once I stopped having people around me who were going, then I didn't go. And then I was like, I don't really miss it because I didn't really hold these beliefs that strongly, I guess. And they were never a comfort to me like I know they are to some people. And it was never like a way I realistically really like ruled my life, I guess. I feel like if I took anything away from Christianity, it was, I guess, the golden rule of like, do what you want to have done to you, and like empathy as a whole, I think, more than religious constructs, I guess.
I didn't really know what to say to people when they would ask me, like, what do you believe? I would basically just be like, well, I'm a Christian, but I had no idea what that meant. And so that was probably most of my childhood, was just saying I was a Christian, but I had no idea what that entailed and what that meant. So it was a pretty long journey for me to really come to a place where I finally started to understand Christianity and actually what it meant, and I started to realize that it's not about what someone's teaching you about the religion. It's about your own personal relationship with God. And when God starts to reach you in ways that you can't explain, or that you just know in your heart, it changes your perception on everything that you were being taught. So if I was taught about stories in the Bible, but I would just kind of take it as fact until I started to actually experience God for myself. And then those things started to blossom into truth, and I started to actually understand. I think a lot of people would go straight towards well, God healed me, he did this, God, did this in my life. And while those are all great things, I think when you're actually coming from a place as a believer and you're speaking to another believer, those are the times to go and say, God healed me, God showed me this, because that's someone else that understands what you're saying. If you're trying to convince somebody and have them understand, why do I believe in God, or why have I stayed with God, they're not going to really be able to understand, because God has not revealed himself to them. And so for me, it's hard to really answer why I stayed with God if I'm talking to somebody that hasn't accepted God as the creator, or Jesus as their savior. So I'm not really going to go down the route of telling you about all the times that I've experienced, amazing things in my life that God, was at the center of, and more so just tell you that when Jesus Christ becomes the Lord of your life, that's it. There's no in between. There's no, I'm a Christian now, or I'm a Christian later. If Christ is the Lord of your life, he is the Lord of your life, and you'll stay with him. And it says that he's not going to let you go. He's going to hold on to you. And I take that to heart. I don't believe that means he sometimes loosens his grip on you. I believe that means he's holding on to you. So for me, it's not necessarily, why do I still believe in God? It's, God still has a hold of me, and I can't deny what he's done in my life. And it's up to his authority over what I think or do.
Time left us scars like it does to us all, but you were immune to its aging room. And as the world grows cold, I will be singing. I don't hate you for what you've done, but you're the one that brought this on. And I don't hate you for what you've done, but you're the one that brought this on. Oh, you're never gonna let my body down. troubles, tell tall tales and riddles, but none of them know my mind. And it's all in the moment that my heart was broken and I drew